Camila stood in front of the mirror that morning a little longer than usual. She adjusted the curls that crowned her head, her fingers tracing the natural pattern of her hair with quiet pride. For years, she had straightened it, tied it up, tamed it into what was deemed professional. But today felt different. Today, she chose authenticity. She wanted to walk into her office on Madison Avenue not just as a marketing strategist, but as herself, fully, unapologetically. The New York autumn wind whipped around her as she stepped outside, but inside she was steady. Her steps echoed in the glass building's lobby as she greeted the front desk security, who smiled a little wider than usual. "New look?" he asked kindly. Camila smiled. "New energy." In the elevator, she caught glances from a few co-workers. Not hostile, just surprised. She knew what that look meant. The kind that asked, silently, if something had changed, if she was still the same safe Camila they were used to. Still, she held her head high, focusing on the day ahead. There was a pitch meeting at 10 o'clock with a new luxury client, and she'd worked late the night before to finalize the deck. Her focus should have been on that, but something in the air already felt off. As the meeting began, Karen, her direct supervisor, clicked through the presentation Camila had prepared. The energy in the room was tight. The client's executives sat at the far end of the conference table, polite and quiet. Camila had seen this dynamic before. Corporate masks, strategic nods, the slow game of trust. Midway through the meeting, Karen paused to make a few remarks about branding and client perception. Then, almost casually, as if she were commenting on the color of a tie, she said, "And of course, as we prepare to meet more client teams, let's make sure our external presentation is always polished and aligned with the image we want to convey. That includes attire, tone, and, well, overall grooming." The word grooming hung in the air. Karen didn't look directly at Camila, but her eyes lingered for a moment too long. One of the other team members, a junior associate, looked down at her notebook, clearly uncomfortable. Camila felt it instantly, the heat rising to her cheeks, the lump forming at the base of her throat. The comment wasn't explicit. That was the genius of it. It was dressed in corporate neutrality, hidden in a sentence about professionalism. But she understood perfectly. Everyone in the room did. The meeting moved on, but Camila's mind had splintered. She kept her face neutral, kept nodding, kept taking notes. But something in her had recoiled. Not in shame, in disappointment. After all the late nights, the leadership praise, the campaign she had saved, this is what she was reduced to, an unspoken critique of her hair, of her identity, disguised as professional advice. Back at her desk, she opened her laptop and stared at the screen, her fingers frozen above the keyboard. The fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly. Karen passed by once, offering a clipped "good job today," without making eye contact. Camila didn't respond. The rest of the day blurred. Co-workers didn't say much, but their eyes flickered with a quiet question. Will she say something? Will she change it back tomorrow? That unspoken curiosity, that expectation of assimilation, it pressed on her shoulders like a weight she didn't ask to carry. By the time she left the office, it was nearly 6 o'clock in the evening. The sun had already dipped behind the skyline, casting long shadows between the buildings. On the subway ride home, Camila leaned her head against the window, watching her reflection. Her hair framed her face like a halo. Beautiful, unbending, yet her mind churned with questions. Should I say something? Was it even worth it? What if this ruins everything I built here? At that moment, it wasn't just about hair. It was about the space she was allowed to occupy, or rather, the version of herself she was expected to present to deserve that space. When she got home, the apartment was filled with the smell of sautéed garlic and onions. Her younger sister, Bianca, was in the kitchen experimenting with a new pasta recipe, while their mother sat on the couch folding laundry, humming softly. Camila didn't speak right away. She hung up her coat, kicked off her heels, and sank into the armchair. The hum of the city outside their window was distant, like a background hum to her spiraling thoughts. "Bad day?" her mom asked gently. Camila nodded. Then she told them everything. She described the meeting, Karen's comment, the silence in the room, the silence afterward. She didn't cry. Not because it didn't hurt, but because she'd learned long ago that crying made them think you were too sensitive, too emotional, too much. Her mother listened in silence, then leaned forward and took Camila's hand. "Baby," she said softly, "this world wasn't built for us to feel comfortable in our own skin. But every time you show up as yourself, you're making room. For you, for the next girl, for all of us." Camila squeezed her mother's hand, holding back a storm she didn't have the strength to unleash. That night, as she lay in bed, her curls spread across the pillow like waves, she kept thinking about the phrase, the image we want to convey. She wondered, bitterly, if what they really wanted was erasure dressed as elegance. But more than anything, she wondered what she would do the next morning. Because the truth was, she didn't know, not yet. Dinner was quiet, but not uncomfortable. Bianca recounted a funny story from her college class, something about a professor who tripped over a projector cable mid-lecture and then kept teaching from the floor as if nothing had happened. Camila smiled at the image, grateful for the brief levity. But even laughter felt foreign tonight, like it belonged to someone else's life. Her mother kept glancing at her between bites, not pressing for more words, just watching the tension still clinging to Camila's posture. There was nothing performative about their silence. It was the kind that held space for whatever needed to come. Later that evening, Camila found herself standing in the bathroom, the fluorescent light above the mirror flickering slightly. She had washed off her makeup, pulled on an oversized sweatshirt, and tied her curls loosely atop her head. The woman looking back at her was one she knew. But tonight, the edges of her identity felt a little frayed. Not unraveling exactly, but disrupted. She opened the cabinet, not searching for anything in particular, just moving with a restlessness that wouldn't let her sit still. Behind a row of moisturizers and half-used serums sat a familiar sight, the old straightening brush she hadn't touched in over a year. Her fingers hovered above it for a moment, not with intention but curiosity. It was surprising, even to herself, how the mere sight of it sparked a quiet, internal debate. Not because she missed using it. She didn't. But because for the first time in a long time, the idea of reaching for it didn't feel entirely absurd. That scared her more than anything. She closed the cabinet door gently and walked back to her bedroom, where Bianca was curled up at the foot of her bed, scrolling on her phone. The younger woman looked up, catching something in Camila's face that made her set the phone aside immediately. "Talk to me," Bianca said, shifting to sit cross-legged. Camila sat beside her and took a deep breath. "Have you ever felt like, no matter how much you've accomplished, one small thing can still make you feel small?" Bianca didn't respond right away. She looked thoughtful, as if weighing how much truth to share. "Yeah," she said finally. "It happens more than I'd like to admit, especially when I'm the only black girl in the room. People don't even have to say anything sometimes. It's just a look or how they switch up their tone when they talk to me." Camila nodded slowly. Today wasn't even about what was said. It was how it was said, like I was being given a polite warning, wrapped in professional language. Passive-aggressive racism is still racism, Bianca said plainly. And the worst part is, when you call it out, you risk sounding angry or emotional, which plays right into the stereotype they already have of you. Their mother appeared at the doorway with a mug of tea in her hands. She offered it to Camila without a word and sat down on the edge of the bed. "I've seen this before," she said quietly. "Different decade, same nonsense." Camila looked at her mother, who had worked for years in education, moving from teacher to administrator, always the only black woman in the room until she wasn't. Her resilience wasn't born of theory. It was practiced, lived, and worn like armor. "They don't say it outright," her mother continued, "but they know exactly what they're doing. They want your skills, your ideas, your energy, but not the full package. Not your truth, not your roots, not your hair. And the cruelest part is, they make you question yourself before you ever question them." Camila swallowed hard. "So what do I do? Walk in tomorrow and pretend it didn't happen? Or show up and start a war I'm not sure I'm ready to fight?" Her mother didn't answer immediately. She looked at her daughters, her voice steady. "You don't have to have the answer tonight. But let me tell you this. When I stopped straightening my hair, I didn't do it to make a statement. I did it because I was tired of hiding. It wasn't a protest. It was peace. And that piece made some people uncomfortable. But I didn't go back. Bianca reached out and took Camila's hand, squeezing it lightly. Whatever you decide to do, it should be for you, not for them. The three of them sat there for a while, the soft hum of the city outside seeping to the apartment walls. A siren wailed distantly. Somewhere, a car alarm chirped. But inside that room, time felt still. Camila sipped the tea, feeling its warm settle in her chest. Not a solution, not a plan, just warmth. Later that night, alone in her room, she opened her laptop. The presentation from that morning was still open, untouched since she left the office. She minimized it and clicked on a folder marked Personal. Inside were pictures she hadn't looked at in a while. Some from college, others from her first few months in the company, and one from the day she had finally worn her natural curls out in public for the first time. She stared at that image now, seeing herself smiling in the sunlight outside a coffee shop in Brooklyn, her curls bold and brilliant against the sky. That version of her had been nervous too, but proud. Defiant, even. Camila closed the laptop and sat back in her chair, letting the silence return. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. She wasn't sure how she would navigate the lines between professionalism and authenticity, between compliance and conviction. But something inside her had shifted, not completely resolved, but awakened. She didn't feel like hiding. Not yet a battle cry. Not yet a decision. Just a quiet refusal to disappear. The next morning began like any other, with the ordinary rituals of a weekday. The alarm buzzing too early, the kettle hissing on the stove, the rustle of fabric as Camila slipped into her neatly pressed slacks and blouse. But under the routine, there was a tightness in her chest that hadn't loosened overnight. She had decided not to change her hair, not because she had found a bold new resolve, but because she couldn't bring herself to reverse a decision that had taken her years to make. The curls were still there, defiant in their fullness, refusing to be tucked away again. Her reflection in the mirror didn't look triumphant, but it looked honest. The elevator ride to the office was quieter than usual, her headphones offering nothing more than a soft instrumental that allowed her thoughts to run freely. She hadn't prepared a confrontation. There was no speech rehearsed, no lines drawn. Only the hope that the day might pass without another incident, without another moment that forced her to weigh survival against dignity. By the time she sat at her desk, the office floor was already humming with early meetings and clacking keyboards. The usual Monday tension in the air was thickened by the unspoken aftermath of Friday. No one said anything about the meeting, but a few glances found her across the room. Quick, uncertain, the way people look at something they can't quite define. Around mid-morning, as she was reviewing data for an upcoming campaign, her phone pinged with a message from reception. Michael would like to see you in his office when you have a moment. Her breath caught slightly. Michael, the director of the company, rarely summoned anyone directly unless it was serious, a promotion, a reprimand, or a crisis. She stared at the message for a moment, then rose, smoothed her blouse, and made her way toward the executive floor. The hallway leading to his office was lined with glass and tastefully minimal decor. A few framed posters from major campaigns the company had led over the years were mounted on the walls. Clean, diverse, polished. Camila had worked on some of them, though her name was always in small print, if listed at all. Michael greeted her with a warm smile as she stepped inside. He was in his late 40s, tall, sharp-featured, with a kind of charisma that made people listen even when he wasn't saying much. His office was flooded with natural light, a large abstract painting hanging behind his desk. "Camila, good to see you," he said, motioning for her to sit. "Thanks for coming up." She nodded, her expression carefully neutral. "Of course. Everything okay?" He leaned back in his chair, folding his hands across his lap. "Actually, I wanted to talk to you about something exciting. We're launching a new internal initiative, a diversity and authenticity campaign. We're trying to highlight the people who make this company what it is, beyond just the corporate branding. Real faces, real voices." Camila blinked, unsure where this was going. "We're going to feature a few employees across departments," he continued. "And I immediately thought of you." There was a pause. Not long, but long enough for her to process the contradiction crashing into her chest. "I've noticed the impact you've had," he said. smiling. Your work speaks for itself, and honestly, you've been an example of professionalism and creativity since day one. But beyond that, you bring a kind of energy that aligns perfectly with what we want this campaign to represent. She offered a polite nod, though the room felt colder now. I'd like to include you in the photo shoot next week, he said. Something candid, maybe even a short video clip. Just you being you. That authenticity is exactly the message we're trying to send right now. Camila kept her face composed. There it was, the contradiction laid bare. Just 3 days ago, she had been indirectly told that her natural self did not align with the company's image. Now, suddenly, her authenticity was marketable. Her natural hair, which had barely been acknowledged in meetings until it became a topic of veiled critique, was now an asset to be spotlighted. She cleared her throat lightly. "Thank you," she said, choosing her words carefully. "That's unexpected." Michael tilted his head. Unexpected how? She hesitated, not quite ready to start the conversation she'd been avoiding. It's just a surprise to hear that now. He smiled again, clearly interpreting her hesitation as modesty. "We're evolving, Camila, and people like you are part of that evolution." She nodded slowly, unsure whether she felt seen or simply used. As she left his office and returned to her desk, her thoughts tangled. There was no mention of what happened in the last meeting, no acknowledgement of the uncomfortable comment, no gesture toward accountability. Instead, she was now being offered a spotlight, but the light didn't feel warm, it felt transactional. Back at her desk, she sat in silence, staring at her screen but not really seeing it. She knew how these campaigns worked. The images would be glossy, the messaging would be aspirational. We celebrate individuality. We value diverse perspectives. The posters would be hung in the lobby, shared on social media, printed in recruitment brochures. And yet behind those images, the lived reality often remained untouched. She had seen it before. Companies eager to display difference but unwilling to confront the biases that made those differences difficult to live with in the first place. The offer wasn't inherently bad. In another context, it might have even felt empowering. But today, it felt like a branding strategy. Her presence, her hair, her face, used to sell an idea of inclusion without actually addressing the exclusion that had occurred just days before. She opened her email and found a calendar invite already waiting in her inbox. Diversity campaign, employee spotlight session next Thursday. She didn't decline it. Not yet, but she didn't accept either. Instead, she leaned back in her chair and exhaled slowly. She wasn't angry. Not exactly. She was calculating. Trying to decide whether this was an opportunity to reclaim a narrative or a trap wrapped in compliments. One thing was certain, whatever choice she made next had to mean something. Because if they were going to put her in front of the camera, it wouldn't be as a symbol. It would be as herself. By Tuesday afternoon, the tension inside Camila had become a quiet drumbeat, steady and inescapable. She had accepted the invitation to the diversity campaign photo shoot, but only because she needed time to understand what accepting actually meant. Was it complicity? Was it strategy? The days passed with polite small talk and scheduled meetings, but the air in the office felt altered. People approached her a little more cautiously, as if aware that something had shifted but unsure how to name it. And still, no one mentioned the comment from Friday. Not Karen, not the co-workers who had witnessed it. Not even the junior associate whose eyes had darted the floor as the words hung in the air. Silence had become the company's most consistent language. By Wednesday morning, Camila knew she couldn't let it continue, not for the sake of making peace, and certainly not in exchange for a photo op. She didn't want to become the face of a campaign that celebrated voices while silencing truth. She hadn't spent years building her career just to be reduced to a symbol, especially not when her dignity had been so easily dismissed days before. The moment presented itself more naturally than she expected. Karen stopped by her desk before the 10 o'clock team meeting, holding a clipboard and a mug with the company logo printed in bold white letters. Her smile was tight, professional, unbothered. "I saw your name on the campaign list," Karen said casually. "Nice to see your work getting the visibility it deserves." Camila turned away from her screen slowly, choosing her words carefully. Visibility isn't the same as respect. Karen's smile faltered just slightly, the shift nearly imperceptible. I'm sorry. Camila stood. Her voice was calm, but the firmness beneath it had been years in the making. Can we talk privately for a moment before the meeting? Karen hesitated but nodded, gesturing toward a small glass-walled conference room just off the main floor. They stepped inside, and for a moment neither of them spoke. The quiet between them was taut. Camila didn't pace. She didn't raise her voice. She simply looked directly at Karen and said, "What you said in Friday's meeting was inappropriate." Karen blinked. "I'm not sure I follow. You implied that my appearance, specifically my hair, was unprofessional," Camila continued. "You dressed it in vague language, but it was clear." And no one in the room spoke up, but everyone heard it. Karen looked down, then back up, her expression hardening into the defensiveness Camila had expected. "That wasn't my intention at all. I was talking about general grooming standards, the kind we've always maintained." "But the message was received differently," Camila replied, unflinching. "An intention doesn't erase impact. What you said undermined my professionalism in front of colleagues and clients. And now, a few days later, the company wants to put my face on a diversity campaign. It's not just hypocritical. It's offensive." Karen crossed her arms. "Camila, you've always been one of our strongest team members. That's why you were chosen." "That's not the point," Camila said. "I wasn't chosen for my voice. I was chosen for optics. If I hadn't worn my natural hair, would I have been invited to represent authenticity, or would I still be invisible?" Karen opened her mouth to respond, but Camila didn't wait. "I've stayed quiet before, thinking it would protect my place here, thinking that if I kept my head down, worked twice as hard, I wouldn't have to deal with this kind of thing. But I was wrong. Silence doesn't protect us. It just gives everyone else permission to pretend nothing's wrong." Karen sighed, clearly trying to regain control of the conversation. "I think you're overinterpreting what was meant as professional guidance, and now it feels like you're trying to escalate a misunderstanding." "No," Camila said sharply, then softened her tone. "I'm trying to hold this place accountable. Because if this company really wants to be a leader in diversity and inclusion, it has to start by listening, by creating a culture where people aren't punished for showing up as themselves. Otherwise, all the campaigns in the world are meaningless." For a moment, Karen said nothing. She seemed smaller now, her authority dimmed by something more potent than confrontation: truth. She looked past Camila, as if searching for something that might give her an exit. But there wasn't one. Not this time. "I'll take what you said under consideration," she finally muttered. Camila nodded once. "I hope you do." They left the conference room in silence. Camila didn't care who saw. Her chest was tight, but not with regret, with release. Something had shifted, not in the company, not yet, but in her. The fear that had lived just beneath her ambition had finally been named, and she had faced it without apology. The team meeting that followed felt surreal. People acted as though nothing had happened. Numbers were reviewed. Clients were mentioned. Strategies were discussed. But Camila noticed the occasional glance in her direction, the flicker of uncertainty in Karen's eyes when she referred to upcoming projects. Power had tilted slightly, and though the balance hadn't changed, the illusion had cracked. Later that afternoon, one of her co-workers, Deshaun from HR, passed her in the hallway and paused. His voice was quiet. "I heard," he said. "Not the details, but enough. Just wanted to say thank you. That took guts." Camila offered a tired smile. "It took too long." He nodded. "Still, you said what a lot of us wish we could." She didn't reply. She didn't need to. The truth was, she hadn't spoken for validation. She had spoken because the silence had become unbearable. As she returned to her desk, she glanced at her inbox. Another reminder for the photo shoot. This time, she didn't ignore it. She clicked accept. Because now, if her face was going to be used as a symbol, it would be on her terms, and with her voice attached. The photo shoot was scheduled for Thursday afternoon in the large glass atrium on the 24th floor. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, casting long strips of light across the polished floor, and reflecting off silver fixtures that framed the open space like a showroom. A backdrop had been set up in one corner, simple and tasteful. Soft gray tones, a few standing lights, a camera fixed on a tripod, and a screen nearby showing test frames. A stylist bustled nearby adjusting shirt collars and smoothing hems, and a photographer, a soft-spoken woman with sharp eyes, gave quiet direction to participants being ushered in and out in 20-minute increments. Camila arrived 5 minutes before her scheduled time. Her ID badge still clipped the lapel of her blazer. She had worn something simple. Clean lines, neutral tones, letting her hair take center stage without needing to declare anything out loud. The curls were full and unapologetically present, shaped by her own hands that morning, not a stylist's. She had rejected the company's offer to send a grooming team for the shoot. Her presence today wasn't for their curation. The photographer welcomed her with a kind smile. "Take your time," she said, motioning to a stool in front of the backdrop. "We're just capturing a bit of personality. Nothing forced. Just you." Camila nodded and settled into place. The camera lens focused, clicked softly, then clicked again. It was oddly quiet. No music, no corporate jargon, no scripts. Just her, breathing steadily as the camera tried to turn her into something frameable. But she didn't feel reduced. Not this time. After a few moments, the photographer lowered her camera and said, "You have a presence that doesn't ask for permission." Camila raised an eyebrow. "Is that a good thing?" "It's the best kind," the woman replied, then resumed shooting. By the time the session ended, Camila thanked her politely and left without fanfare. The shoot wasn't the climax. It was a moment, a frame within a much longer narrative. And the real weight of what she had done wasn't in front of the lens. It was in the undercurrent now moving through the office. That same afternoon, 3 co-workers approached her at different moments. One, a Latina marketing analyst named Rosa, stopped her in the elevator and whispered, "You said what I've been thinking for months." Another, an IT team member who rarely engaged in office politics, sent a short but sincere message to her inbox. "What you did was brave and necessary." The third came from someone she hadn't expected, a project manager named Alicia, who had always seemed distant, almost skeptical. She cornered Camila in the break room near the coffee station, her tone quieter than usual. "I wasn't sure how to feel about everything," Alicia admitted, "but watching how you handled it, you made me think about things differently." Camila didn't respond with anything rehearsed. She just nodded and said, "That means a lot." The ripple had begun. Not a revolution, not yet, but a shift, a fracture in the polished facade that allowed something more honest to begin seeping in. By the end of the week, HR had sent out an internal memo announcing a new series of listening sessions aimed at gathering employee feedback on workplace culture. It was worded diplomatically as expected, but it was a response nonetheless. And though it didn't reference her by name, Camila saw through the language clearly. The company had been moved, not by the campaign they planned, but by the confrontation they hadn't. Even Karen, whose demeanor had remained professionally neutral since their private conversation, showed signs of change. On Friday morning, she approached Camila at her desk and asked softly, "Do you have a minute?" Camila paused, then gestured toward the small lounge area near the windows. They walked together, the tension between them more subdued than it had been days earlier. "I owe you an apology," Karen began, not sitting, just standing beside the window, her gaze lowered. "I've thought a lot about what you said, and I realized I was wrong. I've worked here a long time and told myself I was being fair, treating everyone equally, but I wasn't listening. Not really. And I'm sorry for the way I made you feel." Camila studied her for a moment, weighing the sincerity in her voice. "Thank you," she said simply. "It's not about me being right. It's about all of us being honest." Karen nodded, her voice lower now. "I'm trying to learn." They didn't shake hands. There was no dramatic resolution, but the silence that followed didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt real. As the workday wound down and the office slowly emptied, Camila stayed behind a little longer. Her inbox was full, her to-do list still long, but she let herself take a moment. She stood near the window and looked out over the city, the streets buzzing far below. the skyline glowing orange under the setting sun. She didn't feel victorious, exactly. There had been no triumphal climax, no parade of recognition. But what she felt was far more grounded. She felt seen, not because of a campaign, not because of praise, but because she had shown up and told the truth when it would have been easier not to. And now, others were beginning to speak too. That was the real impact.